Mr. President, please listen to me. I'm just a nurse, but this is important. Those words, soft, almost trembling, cut through the silence of a brightly lit hospital corridor. It was a calm afternoon in New York City. The usual chaos of the pandemic had died down, but the scars it left behind still lingered in the halls of hospitals like Elmview Medical Center. Former President Donald Trump was touring the facility as part of a goodwill mission to honor healthcare workers who had battled on the front lines. Doctors, nurses, and administrators lined up quietly. Cameras clicked. Security personnel kept a careful watch. Trump shook hands, exchanged a few words, and offered smiles. It was a typical visit, until Emily Carter broke protocol. She wasn't supposed to step forward. She wasn't on the official speaking list. But something inside her wouldn't stay silent. A pressure that had built up over years of exhaustion, loss, and emotional strain finally burst. Emily was a 32-year-old ICU nurse with tired eyes and a strong heart. She had seen too much, patients taking their last breaths alone, colleagues pushed to breaking points, and hospital halls echoing with unspoken grief. So as Trump walked by, she did something most wouldn't dare. She took a step forward, just one, enough to catch his eye. Her voice didn't rise, it lowered, gentle, stringent. Mr. President, please listen to me. I'm just a nurse, but this is important. The Secret Service noticed. So did the media crew. There was a second of tension, but Trump held up a hand. He stopped, turned, leaned slightly in. Emily's lips moved, just a sentence. Maybe two. But only Trump heard it. His expression changed, no longer political, no longer guarded. It softened, became human. He didn't respond with words, he simply nodded. Once, deeply. Then he walked away. Reporters whispered, cameras zoomed, but no one knew what had been said. Emily didn't explain. She quietly returned to her station, as if nothing had happened. But the next day, everything changed. Trump posted a tweet, "Met an incredible nurse yesterday. She whispered 12 words that shook me. We need to act, now." Within minutes, the tweet went viral. The media exploded with questions. Who was the nurse? What were the words? Emily Carter's name emerged. So did the story. By evening, she was on every news outlet, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, even international channels. Not because she was dramatic, not because she sought attention, but because, in a single whisper, she had said something no press release ever could. What followed was a movement, and the country wasn't ready for it. Emily Carter wasn't famous. She didn't crave attention. She wasn't a social media star or someone used to standing in the spotlight. In fact, before that day in the hospital hallway, almost no one outside of Elmview Medical Center even knew her name. She was just a 32-year-old ICU nurse from Queens, New York. A regular American. A daughter. A sister. A healthcare worker who had given her heart, soul, and strength to her job for the past 3 years. Emily had worked the brutal pandemic frontline. Day after day, she wore a mask so long it left scars on her skin. She held the hands of patients taking their last breaths. She FaceTimed loved ones to say goodbye on behalf of dying patients. She watched families cry from behind glass walls, unable to touch or comfort each other. She gave everything she had and then gave some more. But beneath the stories of heroism was something darker. Something that wasn't being talked about enough. Emily had seen a quiet crisis building inside the very system meant to care for others. Supplies were running dangerously low. Nurses were reusing masks for weeks. Beds were full, and patients were stacked in hallways. But worst of all, mental health was collapsing. Her colleagues were breaking down, crying between shifts. Some stopped showing up altogether. Others turned to unhealthy ways to cope. The pressure, the death, the trauma, it was too much. And no one was listening. She remembered the day her best friend on the ward, Clara, broke down sobbing during a shift. "I can't do this anymore, Em," she had said. Weeks later, Clara resigned. A few months later, another nurse she knew died by suicide. Emily had reached her limit. She wasn't just tired, she was devastated. And she was angry. So she tried to make a difference. She wrote heartfelt letters to local leaders. She started a small online petition demanding more support for healthcare workers' mental health. She emailed senators, made calls, even showed up at a town hall, but nothing changed. The news cycle moved on. Politicians gave speeches and then went silent. Hospitals were still overwhelmed, and no one seemed to care anymore. Until that day, when Donald Trump walked into her hospital. Emily didn't see a politician that day. She saw a platform, an opportunity, a moment, and she took it. "I didn't whisper for attention," Emily told a reporter from the New York Times. "I whispered because I didn't know if I'd ever get another chance to speak truth to power. I wasn't thinking about headlines. I was thinking about Clara, about every nurse who's breaking and every patient who's still suffering." That single moment, just a few whispered words, wasn't about fame. It was about the thousands of unheard voices behind hospital walls. Emily Carter spoke not as a hero, but as a human being begging the world to listen. And this time, it did. So what exactly did she whisper? That question spread like wildfire. The moment Trump's tweet went live, it was everywhere. News tickers, talk shows, trending hashtags. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What were the 12 words Emily Carter had whispered that shook the former president? Trump didn't argue. He asked questions. He thanked her. He said something she didn't expect. "You've started something, and I think the country's ready to listen." The next morning, Trump announced a healthcare mental health initiative, urging Congress to fast-track support for frontline workers. Whether it was political or personal didn't matter to Emily. What mattered was that someone in power had finally heard them. Her 12 whispered words had echoed all the way to the top. They didn't just shake a former president, they awakened a nation. Trump's tweet had been simple but explosive. "Met an incredible nurse yesterday. She whispered 12 words that shook me. We need to act now." Speculation followed. Was it a policy suggestion? A personal story? A message from a patient? The mystery gave the moment a heartbeat. Cable news panels debated it. Online forums guessed wildly. But later that day, during a live interview on Fox News, Trump broke the suspense. Leaning forward, more serious than usual, he said, "She told me, Mr. President, we are dying inside while saving lives outside." Silence fell over the studio. The host paused. The message didn't need explanation. It needed reflection. Those 12 words hit harder than a press conference. They weren't political. They weren't scripted. They were raw, real, human. That sentence wasn't just Emily's pain. It was the collective scream of nurses, doctors, paramedics, and healthcare workers across the nation. People who had been strong for too long. Who had cried in closets. Who had gone home with bruises on their faces and trauma in their hearts. People who had given everything to save others while slowly losing themselves. The internet erupted with support. Nurses across America began posting their own stories with the hashtag "Dying Inside Saving Lives." Doctors joined in. Mental health professionals echoed the message. The public listened. And Donald Trump, love him or hate him, did something few expected. He called Emily that evening. It wasn't a political stunt. There were no cameras. Just a call between two people. One with influence, one with a voice full of truth. They spoke for 20 minutes. No politics, no blame. Just pain, passion, and possibility. Emily later described the call to the press. He listened. Really listened. "I told him how nurses are leaving the profession. How we need counseling, not just claps. How hospitals need real funding. And how the emotional wounds are deeper than anyone sees." Trump didn't argue. He asked questions. He thanked her. He said something she didn't expect. "You've started something, and I think the country's ready to listen." The next morning, Trump announced a healthcare mental health initiative, urging Congress to fast-track support for frontline workers. Whether it was political or personal didn't matter to Emily. What mattered was that someone in power had finally heard them. Her 12 whispered words had echoed all the way to the top. They didn't just shake a former president, they awakened a nation. By the next morning, Emily Carter was everywhere. Major networks picked up her story. CNN ran a segment titled "The Whispering Nurse Who Woke Up a Nation." MSNBC called her the voice of a silent army. Fox News aired a primetime interview praising her as a brave voice cutting through the noise. She wasn't political, she was powerful. But the attention didn't stay limited to cable news. On TikTok, the hashtag Whisper to Trump exploded, gaining over 20 million views in less than 24 hours. Nurses from every state filmed short videos sharing their own truths. Some cried on camera. Others simply stared into the lens and repeated Emily's words, "We are dying inside while saving lives outside." It became more than a moment. It became a movement. Hospitals across the country began reporting their own Emily moments. In Philadelphia, a janitor at a trauma center shared how he hadn't taken a day off in over a year, and no one had noticed. In Houston, a paramedic wrote an open letter describing how he had held a 7-year-old's hand as she passed, then drove to another call without time to breathe. In Chicago, an ER doctor shared that he was attending therapy in secret because he feared being labeled unstable. These weren't stories about heroism. They were cries for help. And suddenly, the nation was listening. Emily's voice had opened a floodgate. A petition she had quietly launched nearly a year ago, one she had nearly forgotten about, suddenly took off. It was titled, "Protect Our Healers: Mental Health Support for Healthcare Workers." For months, it had hovered at just 3,000 signatures. But after her whisper went public, it gained 1 million signatures in just 48 hours. News anchors mentioned it. Celebrities retweeted it. Even other former presidents commented on the movement, calling for bipartisan support of frontline mental health. And in Washington, something even more surprising happened. A bill that had been gathering dust in a congressional committee for nearly a year, the Frontline Mental Health Support Act, was suddenly revived. Emily's name was mentioned during the committee session. Lawmakers, faced with a surge of public pressure, moved it forward. One senator said, "If it takes a whisper to shake us into action, then maybe we haven't been listening hard enough." Meanwhile, Emily, she wasn't out giving speeches. She wasn't setting up a GoFundMe or doing morning show tours. She simply went back to work. 2 days later, she quietly clocked in for another ICU shift at Elmview Medical. Her scrubs were the same. Her energy was the same. But now, patients whispered thank yous. Nurses hugged her in the halls. One orderly said, "You gave us a voice." Emily didn't want fame. She wanted change. And without trying to be a leader, she had sparked a revolution. A whisper had turned into a roar. When asked in an interview why her whisper had mattered so much, Emily Carter paused for a moment, then spoke softly. Sometimes, the softest voices carry the heaviest truths. Those words echoed across headlines, quotes on posters, even tattoos shared online. In a world that often rewards the loudest, it was a quiet whisper in a hospital hallway that stirred the hearts of millions. America, divided on so many things, seemed to agree on this. Emily's words were more than powerful, they were true. And to his credit, Donald Trump didn't brush it off. Unlike many political moments that come and go, he leaned in. He used his influence, not to argue or take credit, but to amplify her voice. He invited Emily to speak at a national healthcare summit just 2 weeks later. She didn't give a dramatic speech, she simply told stories. Of the young nurse who cried in her car before every shift. Of the older doctor who skipped his own cancer treatments to stay with his COVID patients. Of the janitor who mopped blood-stained floors every night without being thanked once. And she ended her speech the same way she had started it, with a whisper. "We're still here, but we need help." The audience gave a standing ovation. What followed was more than symbolic. Private donors and philanthropists flooded her hospital with millions in funding. Some of the money went to equipment, but much of it, by Emily's request, was dedicated to mental health services for staff. Free therapy, on-site counseling, safe rest zones, things most hospitals had never considered priorities. But now, they were. Soon after, the federal government launched a national task force on healthcare worker mental health, and named it after her, the Carter Commission. It was a rare bipartisan initiative. Both parties cited her courage. Both sides recognized the crisis she had exposed. The task force's first recommendation? Mandatory mental health resources for all hospital staff in high-pressure departments, starting with ICU and emergency care. Still, Emily remained deeply grounded. She declined book deals, skipped TV appearances, turned down a major national award because she didn't want to take a day off work. When her local newspaper asked her if she ever imagined all this would happen, she smiled and said, "I didn't do anything big. I just said what we've all been feeling." Then she added, "If one nurse feels less alone because of what happened, then it was worth it." And in that moment, her legacy became clear. It wasn't the attention. It wasn't the headlines. It wasn't even the policy changes or national praise. It was connection. A whisper that made millions feel heard. A nurse who never wanted a spotlight, but became the light for countless others in the darkest of times. Sometimes all it takes is a moment, a whisper, a few words spoken from the heart. Emily Carter wasn't trying to change the world. She was just trying to survive in it. But by speaking up softly, she reminded us all of something powerful.